Hello and welcome to Philosophy Vibe, the channel where we discuss and debate different philosophical ideas. Today we're going to be focusing on some ethics and looking into the theory of moral relativism. Excellent. Now, moral relativism is quite a broad ethical theory that actually encompasses a number of different ideas. However, the fundamental and underlying principle of moral relativism is that there is no absolute, universal or objective morality. It does not exist. Instead, morality is relative to a particular standpoint. The truth of moral judgments is relative to a particular society or to a particular time period. This stands in complete opposition to moral objectivism, which claims there is such a thing as objective moral truths. So, for moral relativists, when one makes a moral claim, there is no universal or objective truth. The truth or falsity of any moral claim is solely dependent and relative as to when, where, and who is saying it. In this video, we are going to look at why someone would develop a moral relativist position, and John and I will look into the strengths of the theory as well as the challenges. Great, let's get started. Okay, so the beginnings of moral relativism start with descriptive relativism. Now, descriptive relativism is the empirical awareness that there does exist fierce disagreements when it comes to morality. This is clear-cut for everyone to see. There are moral disagreements from culture to culture, from time period to time period. Morality changes, and the moral judgment you express in one continent or country or community can seem perfectly right, but in another it is completely wrong. Yes, I understand. From there we get to cultural relativism. Very similar to descriptive relativism, however, it emphasizes that culture is the defining factor of moral judgments. All our ethical beliefs, practices, actions, everything we hold as moral, these are all rooted in the culture we are brought up in. And so, all morality is completely and solely relative as to what culture it comes from. For example, monogamy is seen by some cultures as moral and the right thing to do, and polygamy is seen as immoral, whereas in other cultures, polygamy is seen as completely fine and even encouraged. Contraception can be seen by some cultures as responsible, and in others it can be seen as a sin. The list goes on, and in fact increases more when you look into cultures of different time periods. Infanticide, slavery, child marriages, all of these things were completely acceptable once upon a time, and now we see them as disgusting, immoral, evil acts. This is because the morality of these things was completely relative to the culture and the time that they came from. Fascinating. And from there, this leads us to metaethical relativism. Because of descriptive and cultural relativism, we then must agree that there is no absolute or universal truths to any moral claims. The truth or falsity of moral judgments are solely dependent on the culture and the groups of people in that society. We have no grounds for preferring one set of moral principles to another. We have no grounds for saying one culture's practices or norms are better or worse than another. As there is no universal moral truths, there is no better or worse, there is only different. Each culture, each society will hold that their moral principles are right, and in a way they are, personally, but in a way they are not, as no one is objectively right or wrong. The truth or falsity of any moral claim, judgment or action is relative to that particular culture, not to some universal or absolute truth. Yes, this makes sense. Okay, so now let's look at the strengths of moral relativism as an ethical theory. First and foremost, it perfectly explains why moral disagreements exist. This problem has always been a huge issue for ethicists. If there exists universal moral truths, then why do people and cultures disagree so much? Why have philosophers struggled to find an ethical code that everyone agrees to? Why are there so many moral clashes? Surely objective morality would have been discovered by now. Surely all people would have been able to discover and agree to an absolute moral code. Moral objectivity seems unreachable, and why is this the case? The most straightforward and obvious answer is because it does not exist. There is no such thing as moral objectivity. There is no such thing as an absolute moral truth. All we have is different cultures and societies with their own practices and their own norms. This is all morality is, just the behaviours of different cultures. We do not have to stress about finding the moral truth or coming up with a universal behavioural formula, as it does not exist.
I see.
Furthermore, moral relativism better explains the existence of cultural diversity. If there was one correct way to act, one correct set of moral principles, then all cultures would more or less be the same. But the fact we have such cultural diversity highlights that there is no universal moral code, just cultural relativism.
Interesting.
And finally, moral relativism is the best ethical basis for cultural tolerance. If we escape the outlook of seeing some cultures as right or wrong, better or worse, but just come to see them all as different, then we are in a better position to be more tolerant. We will learn to respect all cultures and practices, and perhaps we can learn from one another.
Great points you have raised, but I see big problems for moral relativism as an ethical theory.
Like what?
Firstly, I would argue that you are presupposing that the existence of objective morality would mean everyone would know the moral truth. This is a mistake. We can still very much have absolute moral truths, yet just do not know or have not discovered these truths.
No, I disagree here. Think about how far we have come as a human race, how much we have discovered, and still, after all these years, we are having moral disagreements. This just highlights the fact that there is no objective moral truth.
I think that is a mistake. There is so much we have not discovered yet as a human race. I think it is a huge error to just assume we should have discovered moral truths by now, and from there you are denying their existence altogether. Consider this. People disagree about the origins of the human race. Even scientists can disagree about the origins of the human race. Just because there is disagreement does not mean there is no absolute truth as to the origins of the human species. There is, we have just not discovered it yet. So, just because there are moral disagreements does not in any way, shape or form prove there are not universal moral truths. There could very well be, it's just that we have not discovered them yet.
I see.
Furthermore, I believe moral relativists exaggerate just how much cultures differ in terms of morality.
Really? Come on, I went through just a few differences in cultures, but you know there are so many moral differences between cultures.
I understand there are moral differences, but I am saying there are more moral similarities than differences.
Like what?
I am pretty sure cold-blooded murder is wrong in near enough every culture. Theft, torture of innocent people, the list could go on. If you use moral differences as proof of moral relativism, then I could use moral similarities as proof of moral objectivism. A further objection. Would a moral relativist have to agree that obvious and blatant immoral acts that were once accepted should have in fact been tolerated? Would a moral relativist honestly say that slavery or infanticide, as done in the past, was in fact moral at the time?
Well, I think anyone looking at those actions from a modern perspective would agree that they are wrong, but in another time, yes, they were accepted.
But even by today's standards, suppose there was a specific culture that practiced forced labour, the moral relativist would have no reason to value one side who morally disagree over the other side who accept or promote it. As you said, according to moral relativists, both cultures are no closer to objective truth. Both cultures are neither wrong or right, just different. So, the moral relativist would remain apathetic to a culture that promotes slavery.
Yes, I see your point.
This then brings me to my other point. Moral relativism does not really take into account the disagreements within a culture. It claims that morality is relative to culture, but to find an entire society who are all homogeneous when it comes to morality is very unlikely. There are huge moral disagreements within specific cultures. So how can moral statements be right or wrong relative to a culture if there is so much difference and diversity within a culture?
I think the fact that there is so much moral diversity within cultures further strengthens the idea that there is no objective moral truth. And here we can take moral relativism further to the individual level, and when we do find such diverse moral judgments, we can lean on ethical subjectivism as a theory. This theory claims that the truth or falsity of moral judgments depends solely on the attitudes of people. So, when a person expresses a moral opinion, this is either true or false relative to that specific person's moral attitude. This is moral relativism refined down to the individual.
I cannot agree with this. Moral truths will become so arbitrary, this might as well become a moral skepticism theory.
How so?
If two people are looking at the same act at the same time, one person says it is moral, the other person says it is immoral. According to ethical subjectivism, both people are right, yet they are saying two different things about the same event. This makes no sense. If two people stand in the same street at the same time, one says it's raining, the other says it's not raining, only one can be right. To say both are right is a contradiction, and I feel the same way about the moral case too.
Very good point. There are problems with the moral relativist position, but equally there are problems with the moral objectivist position. How do we account for the moral disagreements and diversity? This is still a huge problem.
I agree.
Maybe it's not as simple as every possible moral judgment is objectively true or false or relative. Maybe morality is a blend between moral objectivism and moral relativism.
Explain.
I would argue that there are fundamental objective moral truths. These are the promotion and protection of life, freedom and happiness, and the minimization or outright elimination of pain and suffering. These are objective moral truths. You can say they have come from God, but it would be easier to just say they are innate evolutionary desires based on our human reality. Now, based off of these objective moral truths, we develop our behaviors as to how we can promote life, freedom and happiness and eliminate pain and suffering. It is these behaviors that become relative to cultures and time periods and individuals. So, for example, cold-blooded murder is wrong. That is an objective moral fact because it goes against the promotion of life and the elimination of pain. Every sound-minded person would agree with that. That's easy. But let's look at, say, arranged marriages. One culture may believe that arranged marriages promote happiness as suitable partners are picked with ease, whereas another culture would disagree and see arranged marriages as going against one's freedom and increasing emotional pain. Here is where the morality becomes relative. So ultimately, there are objective moral truths, but in reaching these truths, our moral behavior can be considered relative.
Very good point.
If you would like the script to this video, it is part of the Philosophy Vibe Ethics ebook available on Amazon. This will be a great help for anyone studying ethics. Also, if you want to support this channel, please check out our merch store on Teespring. Some great philosophy themed hoodies, t-shirts, mugs and more. All purchases really help out this channel. But that's all the time we have for now. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed the vibe. And what does everyone else think? Who out there is a moral relativist and how best would you defend your moral position? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and share. And for more philosophical debates, please subscribe to the channel. Take care, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. Bye bye.